I can edit later.
I got the,
All right, thank you everyone for attending my presentation today. I know it's Good Friday, and on top of that, it's Friday. And so I'm very grateful for you all for your time to be here today for the core standards that we have to follow as we, go through our program. And so basically in the report, we have to show evidence of different things under each standard. So I just wanted to share that with you all so you could just kind of see. And I have to do this every year, Katie and I. We both have to do it. So yes, Katie is the other work-based learning coordinator in the room. All right, so thank you. Let's get started. All right, so just to start off, I just want to give a little bit of background information that really has to deal with me. So you see there's two logos here on the screen. Does anybody even recognize? Well, one obviously, Regal Cinemas, but does anybody recognize the other one? Prudential. All right, so actually this is the 1990s version of the DECA logo. Okay?
Really?
Yes, it is. So that's from, it's changed over the years, but that's the one from 1990s because I graduated in high school, 1994. This is me and DECA. See if that's me right there. All right, so the reason why I bring this up is because I was also in work-based learning program. Back then in the 1990s, they did not call it that. In fact, when they did the work release program, they did it under the CTSO. So you either were in FBLA where they aligned you with like an office job, or they aligned you with DECA, which would be anything else, outside of that. So I did DECA because I didn't want to be stuffed up in an office job. And so my job when I was in the work release program was I worked at Regal Cinemas. That's why I have the popcorn and the candy that I picked. Just a little nostalgia for today. So, what I can tell you about my experience when I did DECA, because that's essentially what we called it. We didn't call it work release. We didn't call it work-based learning back then. We called it DECA. We didn't do a lot of the things that we're known for DECA to do now with the competitions and things like that. It was a class where we talked about employability skills in the class, and then I would leave school early and I would go to work at Regal Cinemas. But I did value what I learned in that class because we did learn about, how to leave a job properly, how to do interviewing. I would say we pretty much learned a lot across the board. The only thing I don't remember, because I remember distinctly learning this when I was in college, was how to write a resume. But pretty much everything else, dealing with employability, I did learn in DECA in that class. So that's just a little bit of background about me being involved in work release back then. All right, so the purpose of this presentation is two things: to share my findings in the 3-year program evaluation of work-based learning at CETA, and then to discuss my program strengths, the challenges, and implications for instructional practice. So that was kind of the basis. And so why does work-based learning matter? This is a quote from one of my resources. Work-based learning provides a critical bridge between academic instruction and real-world career experience, allowing students to develop soft skills that are often overlooked in a traditional classroom. Now, for us in CTAE, we're very familiar with this, obviously, because that is our number 1 standard. When we think about the other, other academic classes, you don't really have that. And just take my kids, for instance. They're in a specialized program, and they will never take a CTAE class. They just don't have enough room in their schedule to do it at Pebblebrook, being in performing arts. But these are things that I still work with them on, and hopefully at some point, besides me teaching them these things, they will learn it somehow. And hopefully, and then even for them to do work-based learning was gonna be a challenge, which is why I'm trying to push my own kids into doing some type of experience in the summer. That's really the only time they have it available in their schedule. And that is something that they've expanded on as well in work-based learning, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Like, how do we reach those kids who are not in CTAE classes? And there is a way to do that. All right, just a quick overview of the evolution of work-based learning. So again, I talked about the early focus, it was called vocational training, limited academic integration. I even being in DECA, I never took a CTAE class. That's really pretty much all I had. The students in my high school that decided to do, I guess what you would call like a CTAE class, it was like typing and things like that, and they aligned with the FBLA when they did it. I remember distinctly going into the counselor, you know, you have that conversation with the counselor about back then what path you were going to take, and you either chose you were going to do vocational or you were going to do college ready, college diploma. And I said, well, I know I'm going to college, but I would not mind taking a auto class. And the counselor was like, but you said you were going to college. I said, yeah, but I want to learn about cars. And she was like, oh no, you can't do that. I mean, literally she told me, you can't do that. You can only choose one or the other. And so I was going to college, so I just, you know, they literally will put you in those tracks. So of course that has changed over the years. And so as things started to develop, you got more and more CTAE classes that we know today. And then I remember even when I started in education in the early 2000s, you know, we had CTAE classes, but at that time, I don't really recall having like pathways, right? You just took random CTAE classes. And back then I taught marketing. So I was doing marketing, I did sports marketing, I did fashion marketing, but it wasn't like a pathway where you had the 3 levels. And then by the time I came back into education, I took a break, and when I came back into education, then there were the pathways. And so that brings us to our modern work-based learning. And then now we have an emphasis on, you know, doing reflection, having that mentorship, and having that real world application. Now I must say, in the state of Georgia, we are known as almost like a model for work-based learning. I've found out over the years as I've come back that a lot of other states look at our model of how we do work-based learning here in Georgia, and they really do try to implement that where they are, because it is very structured, it is very, what's the word? It's very well put together, how we do work-based learning here in Georgia. And when I went to the national conference last year, I really found that out when they found out that I was from Georgia. They had a lot of questions about how we do things here. So it is known across many states, the Georgia work-based learning. All right, so these are the 3 research questions that I kind of based my research on, and of course what I'm going to reveal to you in this presentation. How effective is work-based learning programs supporting our students' success? To what extent are placements aligned with pathways, and what employability skills do students gain? My research design, I did a mixed method study, and this is based on the 68 students that I've had from the 3 years that I've been the coordinator here. And my data sources were my placement records through CTERN, which you all are familiar with CTERN, but more specifically for us in work-based learning, we have a subset in CTERN called CNET, where we have to implement all of our information about our work-based learning students in that database, and then the exit surveys that I give and the reflections that I give. All right, so the participants, like I said before, are 68 students between my first year here at CETA, which is 2022 to 2025, and then here's a breakdown of the students that I had each year. Most participants are high school juniors and seniors. However, I did have one student who is a senior now, but she did start her sophomore year. And it is one of the requirements that you have to be 15. It wasn't always 15 for work-based learning, but it was just 16, but they dropped it back to 15 a couple of years ago. All right, then the next thing is talking about the placement alignment. So the one thing I want to point out, all right, so this is what they call the optimal work-based learning placement, which is what they call the YAP, Youth Apprenticeship. And this is the ultimate goal of work-based learning. This essentially is what we want to see in every work-based learning program. But sometimes they just can't exist. It could be because they don't offer the pathways, or we don't have the employer networking, or to have those involved. We're very fortunate here at CETA that we do have this, because we do have the high demand pathways here with the construction, automotive, healthcare, and cybersecurity networking. And then when I took this role, I remember distinctly they told me that all the placements that I have do need to be aligned in this way. Okay, so we already know that the students that come here, they come here specifically for these pathways, and then when they do the work-based learning with CETA, with me, it has to align with the pathway that they've chosen here at CETA. Now, because they are essentially Osborne students, they do have the opportunity to do work-based learning with Ms. Hunt. If they decide, and it has happened for various reasons, they decide they don't want to do a placement that's aligned with their pathway. But I still feel like, and I think you all will agree with me, I still feel like that it's still something to be gained to even still have that job placement experience. And so here are the other qualifications of placement. So we have ESD, which is Employability Skill Development, and basically in a nutshell what that means is that they've just taken a CTAE class. It really just has to be one. They don't have to finish the pathway. They could or could not be going to college to study something in that placement, but more than likely probably not. So nothing is really aligned with the ESD. In fact, when we do our annual report, they want to show that we have less than 25% of our work-based learning students are 25% or less ESD classification. So that should be your lowest number. Then we have what's known as co-op, which we don't really use very often, but basically this is having a student who is still in the pathway class, and then they're doing a placement as well. But honestly, we just really don't use that classification. Then there's the internship, which when I used to do work-based learning at Sprayberry part-time, I had a lot of internship, and the reason why that ended up happening is that I would have ROTC pretty much across the board can be aligned with any job that they get out in the world, and also marketing. And I had a lot of my marketing kids. That was a good way for me to funnel a lot of students toward work-based learning, is that they had marketing with me, and I guess maybe they just enjoyed me, and so they said, yeah, we want to do marketing with Ms. Shaw, work-based learning with Ms. Shaw. So they would do, and then I would just align them with marketing, and that would turn into an internship because marketing pretty much is everywhere. And then every once in a while, I would have a youth apprentice where it was perfectly aligned. And one example that I can think of right now, and only because I still keep in contact with this student, is she was culinary, and she also did marketing. She went to Johnson & Wales, which is a culinary institute, and then when she got out, she ended up being employed with numerous different type of culinary industry type things. Right now, she is with a company in Canada where they do a lot of trade shows, and they do a lot of like test kitchen type of things. But it's really awesome what she's doing, and so that's the perfect youth apprentice example. So with the youth apprentice, it doesn't end here with those students. As a matter of fact, so if all of you all know Dr. Saf Espinosa, and she is our youth apprenticeship person for Cobb County. Her job, amongst other things that she has to do at the district level, is that she tracks the YAP students once they leave high school. So she has to track them for the next however many years that they gain 750 hours working in the industry that aligned with what they did in high school, along with any type of certifications that they earned along the way. And that could be that, say for instance, you have a school that has education, like I guess early childhood, and so they go to college, obviously, because that's one of the requirements for early childhood. And so they go to college, they get their degree, and then they go into a school system and they work, and then, so once they get to 700, I want to say 750 hours that they have worked in that industry, then at that point they are a YAP completer. And so she puts that, she has a separate report, separate from what we do, and she reports that.
You said 3 years after graduation?
Well, no, 750 hours. Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it is
So,
post-graduation.
Post-graduation, yes, that's right. And so, and so it could be a different situation. It could be a student that's in automotive. So they've done the pathway here at CETA. They decided they did not want to go to college. They go straight into the workforce. And so if they get 750 hours post-graduation, then yeah, they're a YAP completer. So, and that's how that works. All right, so the next part is talking about this soft skills development. And so I've listed all of the ones at the bottom that I typically ask students in the surveys that I give them about what was the most beneficial out of not only the things that I talk about with them sometimes when we have our meetings, but then also in the career related assignments that I assign to them on a monthly basis. And so I make sure I try to cover all of these things, and across the board, they say that all of these things were the ones that were the most beneficial to them. And I'm glad to see that communication was one of the highest ones, because that's the one that's in the high demand when we go to all those meetings that people talk about. Here are some of the student reflection highlights that I got from students. And so what I did, not only do I have the exit surveys that I give students at the end of either the semester or the school year, depending on when they enter and exit the work-based learning program with me, but then for this research that I did kind of like a status update type of survey. I didn't get a lot of responses from that, but I got enough, about 60 to 70%, that was enough that I included into my research as well. So this was just a couple of the responses. So that was the supplemental survey I was talking about before. 100% they recommend the work-based learning program to students. And we'll talk about why we don't have all students doing it, and there are reasons why. But students saw the program as a stepping stone towards career readiness. And some of the quotes I had is, you know, this helped me figure out what I wanted to do after high school. I got real experience that made me more confident in going straight into work. So there were some cross-STEM analysis. Of course, because we are a very specified program here at CETA, there is a high alignment with CTAE, obviously, with the pathways and then going into their placement. A lot of them, and I've not just self-professed in the surveys, but I've seen it myself, how I've seen students grow from, you know, from the time they started the work-based learning program into now they're about to graduate. You can see the progression. This third one was really, really good because there is a point with work-based learning where we go out and we figure out who is gonna be the mentor at the job placement. Sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't. But a good example of when it happens and it happens well is with automotive. Mr. Hagan does a really, really good job of cultivating those relationships in industry when it comes to automotive. And I find that pretty much all of the kids in automotive have been paired up with somebody at that placement that's like their go-to, who is almost like their teacher on site when it comes to their placement. And then just the data from the placement surveys and reflections reveal consistent themes of strong placement alignment, soft skill development, and positive student experience. All right, so with everything that's going so well for the work-based learning program here at CETA, there are some challenges. I would say the number one challenge by far, and just not for me, but really pretty much across the board, is the transportation. I think there are a lot of students that have the willingness to do this program, but they just don't have the reliable transportation to get to their job placement. So that's just kind of an ongoing thing. But I am pretty surprised with some students who are really high determined to do it, what they come up with, or even the parents. I mean, I had one student who, actually, the one that started off as a sophomore, she didn't have a license. Her dad would come pick her up every day and take her to work that semester. And then as she's gotten older, obviously she's got her license, she's gotten a little bit of, you know, some transportation, not every day. I think, you know, the family shares a car, but nevertheless, she finds a way to get to work. The employer availability, and this is another one. And so far it's getting better and better, but I just think about one placement that I had last school year where we had a placement at Georgia Power. And I thought it went well, and every time I would go to the site visit and talk with the supervisor, they gave good feedback about the students that were there. And so I was really excited. I was like, this is great, because I have somewhere to put my energy and power students that were interested. But, you know, when I went back at the end of the year and I tried to have a conversation with them to try to buy in and commit for the next year, they're like, oh yeah, I don't know if we'll be able to do this, you know, next year. We'll see. We'll get back to you, you know, that kind of thing. So that happens sometimes as well. So that's just an example about that employer availability. And then just barriers such as transportation, we talked about that, sorry. All right, so there were some limitations of my study itself. And the one is that it was just a small sample size. We're a small operation here at CETA. You know, our cap is 500 kids, but we didn't have 500 kids enrolled this year. And like I said, because of some of the barriers, I only have so many that actually go through the program. For that supplemental survey, I had a low response rate, but hopefully if I keep doing this and I wanna further my research on this topic, maybe I can get a bigger pool. And then I really didn't get any formal employer data. So that's not to say it doesn't exist, because we do have employer evaluations that we have to give, that we're required to give. For each student, they have to do 2 a semester. But I really didn't go specifically to the employer to ask them questions. I just really didn't have the time. What I'll keep doing is I'll maintain an emphasis on mentor relationships. Just so, you know, it's done really, really well in the automotive arena. But across the board, I probably need to just make sure that the kids going to all the placements, they are paired up with a mentor, that they have that person to go to at each placement. And then the reflections and the training plan structure. I think I've improved every single year since I started here on that. The reflections I've done forever, even when I was a part-time coordinator, and I like the reflections because I don't see the kids every day. So the reflections really give me an idea. You know, I ask them a list of questions, and they're open-ended questions. They're not like, you know, multiple choice or whatever. So they gotta tell me what's going on. And you know, I say you gotta do 50 words per question, you know, to make sure I get a substantial amount of information. And I'll never forget, when I was a part-time coordinator, I had this one student. She worked at Wendy's, but she was one of my former marketing students. And I remember I was reading one of her reflections one day, and she was telling me about a situation where she was being harassed by her supervisor. And I felt that maybe she probably told me in the reflection, because maybe that was a hard conversation to tell me in person. So I was really glad that she, you know, shared with me that information, because it started a situation where I had to go see the employer, find out what was going on, and, you know, of course, they say what they say. And then, you know, essentially we just had to remove her from that placement, and we found her something else. But, you know, I just kind of wonder if I had not had that reflection in place, would I have ever known about it? Would she would ever come to me face to face and, you know, tell me? I had no idea. So I'm glad I had that in place. All right, so what I will improve on is that always expand my employer base. We could never have enough employer partners. Strengthening the post-grad planning. Now this is one that I didn't realize I needed until I was actually doing kind of this research. And then things started to happen. I noticed it first last year, and then it happened again this year. And what it was is that I had a couple of students say, so this is it. I said, yeah, this is it. Congratulations, you're graduating. And they're like, well, what do I do now? What do you want to do? And so for whatever reason, they had a really hard time of what that looked like to transition, not only out of work-based learning, but just transition, especially if they weren't necessarily going to college and then they were going straight into the workforce. They just, for some reason, couldn't put the connection together of what needs to happen next. They said, well, do I keep my job? I said, well, do you want to keep your job? I mean, do you like working there? Oh yeah, I love it. And, you know, some of them signed with those companies. I said, well, you're signing with the company, so you must like it. They like you. Do you want to keep going? Oh yeah. I said, well, that's just what it is. They were like, well, and then I actually had one last year to say, so I won't see you anymore. I said, not unless you want to. I mean, you can come see me anytime. I try to emphasize, now I realize, again, because it happened again this year, I said, you can come see me anytime you want. You know, I feel like I need to make it very clear to them that, yes, I was your resource here when you were a high school student, work-based learning program, obviously. But if you need any help outside of that, I'm still gonna be here. Unless I win $1 million, then I don't have to be here, but I'm gonna be here. And so it just so happened that I had a cybersecurity student, networking actually, that came, and emailed me, and she was just like, I need some help. At Bethune-Cookman College, I'm coming home for the summer, I'm looking for an internship. She emailed me, I reviewed her resume, and I said, okay, well, this looks good, let's see what we can find for you. So, that's all to say, we're still here for them, so. Alright, and so what I would suggest to you as CTAE teachers, and I think some of you obviously already do this, is just, collaborate with me, whatever that means. I know all of you emphasize the soft skills. And then, how many of you actually do student reflections in your class, with whatever? Because I started to do this, when I was a marketing teacher. I don't know if it's just the marketing in me, but I used to always give like feedback surveys at the end of that semester, just to find out what their experience was in the class. And I think I started doing that when I was, doing part-time work-based learning. I was like, I should do this probably for marketing, to see what's going on, to see what they're thinking as they're leaving my class. So it really does help, and that's one of the ways that we say, let's use our data to drive our decisions. And it did, in those surveys, when I think back with marketing, they would tell me, Michelle, I didn't really like this project, and here's the reason why. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, let me see if I can change this. And so it doesn't look that way. And it's the same thing for work-based learning. I try out new things. I look at the monthly assignments, what's going to benefit them in the long run, career-wise. And if it's not, benefiting them, then I was like, okay, well, I need to move on to something else, and I do. So I try to figure it out. But the one thing that never fails that I'm still trying to work at is that these kids are really, really wanting financial literacy. They want to know, okay, I'm earning this money. How do I make this more money work for me? What do I do with my money? What does the taxes look like? That's an ongoing thing. So I'm constantly trying to feed that for them. But and then also when I talk about collaborate with work-based learning coordinators, so I can think of 2 instances where this was, where I did this. So I remember my first year with Cherry Drake. She said there was a Quest Diagnostic something or another. We rode out to Alpharetta to try to meet with these people, to see if we could form some type of collaboration, because at the time she was phlebotomy and she was trying to figure out how to fulfill the sticks. So that was even 2 years ago. Now we have WellStar, so it looks a little different, but I just remember back then, that's what me and her did. And then I think about how me and Hagen, one day we just went down on Cobb Parkway, and we just went from dealership to dealership, and we talked to these people. And it was so great to have both of us there together. I could talk about the program, he could talk about the students that he has. He has these students, he knows these students, he knows what they're capable of doing. So it was just a great way for us to talk. And we did get, at least 2, I would say. Pugmire.
Recently I got Lexus too, that was
a
couple weeks ago.
Yeah. So it's just, stuff like that. I know it takes time, but I think in the long run, it's worth it to do, to do those kind of things. And that is all I have. Yes. Questions?
So it's funny, your last statement, we were just talking about that because she brought up about the signing date, so post-secondary employment, and just in internships during the school year as well, and how to increase it for cyber and networking, because we don't have that many. So you just mentioned, so post-planning, maybe can we start going somewhere to talk to people?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
my question was to her, well, were we supposed to do that outside of our advisory board?
And it's hard to ask you all to do that, because y'all are already loaded with so many things that y'all have to do anyway. I mean, especially when it comes to like preparing for the EOPA and things like that. It's hard for me to ask you to do, I try as much as possible. So it's really kind of on you about how much you want to do. So if that's something you want to do, let's do it.
You wanna be on the news.
I kinda thought.
That's what we want.
Pre-planning or post-planning.
WellStar was on the news, they were in the newspaper.
I thought that's what you were going to.
I'm good at the news. I need the kids to get
Some jobs, yeah. And I think that's why, that's why me and Katie are part of our report. If you see it in one of the standards, is that we go to like those, I'm about to call them Rotary meetings, but we go to the chamber meetings and we go to the Smyrna Business Association meetings to meet these people every time they have a luncheon, it's, you know, sometimes it's the same people, but sometimes it's different people. And then, also, that's why I go to other counties, like, what was that? My first year here, I went to Paulding to help with they had an event in Paulding. I went and helped, that's where I met Mr. Weber.
Oh, okay.
That's how I met him. He was
Which
one
is
of the.
why he works with the school.
Yeah,
okay.
because they're located in
Paulding,
Paulding,
right.
right. And so that's where I met him. He kind of stood out a bit, and I was like, you know, who are you? And I introduced myself, and I got his contact, and, you know, next thing you know, he was on your advisory committee, and we got Ricky, a job there, and we were,
With possibly the.
yeah, and so, you know, kids are kids, and we learned that. And so it didn't work out this, school year, but, you know, I just try to stay in contact with them so we can keep the lines of communication open, cause you just never know when they'll say yes.
Yeah, cause that's a great place for us to put our those high flyer kids that you have,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yep.
Like our one that's going to NLC, you know, trying to place him because he would be a great,
Yeah.
like, customer service, you know, technician
Yeah.
for that beginning portion,
Mhm.
because that's what he's doing.
And I think the other thing is too, is that when they see a place like CETA, they're waiting for the group to graduate. And I just talked to somebody the other day who the company is like they graduate. And I just talked to somebody the other day who the company is like they manufacture the machines that do imaging for healthcare. And so as instantly I'm thinking, oh, you want a healthcare kid? Oh no, that's not what they want. They want somebody computer, engineering, automotive. But he was still looking for someone after they graduate. And I tried to say, I said, you know, that's fine. You know, we have those kids. I said, but you may want to consider capturing them while they're still in high school. Make that small investment while they're still in high school and
Everybody
build
else
that
is sucking up.
relationship. Yeah, build that relationship because they can get in your apprenticeship program, because that's what he was bragging about, because he went through the process of being a registered apprentice, you know, with the state of Georgia, and that was great. I said, but now you're running the risk of just getting a kid, maybe who doesn't really have a plan after high school. You put them in your apprenticeship program, and what if they don't like it? Get them while they're still in high school, and then that way you don't really have too much, you know, to lose if they
Right.
decide no. But then if they say yes, then you have a loyal person here.
And then you train
them the way you want
train them exactly the way you want them, and they haven't been corrupted,
Yeah.
Right.
so.
But
Yay.
any other questions? Well, I appreciate y'all's time so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey!
I hope y'all learned something.
Good
Yes.
I didn't know the Gap, I've been to the Gap thing before, but I didn't realize that it would have any hours. I knew that they followed
Yeah.
them. How do they just keep in
So,
contact with them?
thank you.
Bam.
So part of that exit
Happy
survey
Easter.
that,
You too.
thank you, Ms. Hunt. Thank you, Katie. So part of that, yeah,